Good afternoon, Chair Bolandroff, members Garrett and Holmes, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you, Gretchen. Good afternoon, everybody. I'll now convene the executive management team meeting for Wednesday, October 8th. Director Becky Smith, licensing and regulations, is out today, and we have Caitlin Bamba, Deputy Director of Operations, filling in for Becky. So welcome, Caitlin. So we'll start right in with our regular agenda item, and we've got a legislative update from Mark Webster. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair Bolandroff and members Garrett and Holmes. I think I've said this each time post-session, but I really don't have a lot for you today. The cannabis tour for the Senate Labor and Commerce Committee, it was in Tacoma that we were looking forward to last time, was canceled. So nothing to report there. I think we're close to having something to report on several potential cannabis bills this session, but I haven't seen any actual language and don't want to really speculate too much there. As an example, I think you know that we've been hearing about an excise tax bill, and we should have more to report on that at the next month's meeting. Same on Kratom, some ideas about how to bring Kratom into some sort of regulatory structure. It's a big topic around the country. We've seen states do a number of different things. Again, too early to get into specifics here, but I think there's going to be a lot of work on that between now and the start of session. I would just point out that we continue to get a lot of questions about traceability. You know that, and we're trying to respond to a number of people who've, I think, learned about that issue following the JLARC report, including now some public health partners. We've been asked to present again at JLARC in early December. Not sure that we have a whole lot more to say on the topic, especially before any budget proposals are released. On that budget front, the Department of Ag is again asking for funding for the accreditation work that they have, and for the cannabis labs and for the CLASP team. I think on implementation, you've got a great rundown this morning on bills like 1515 and 5403 from Kevin Walder. So I think I'm just going to end it there and see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Mark. I have a couple of quick questions. The cannabis tours, are they working on rescheduling that, or do you know what happened with that?
I know a couple of members were ill. Okay. And they didn't want to do it for one or two members. I've heard that they might want to reschedule that, but if they do, we're probably looking at 2026.
Okay, great. And then going back to the Kratom, I don't know, I'm looking at my fellow board members and wondering, I know for me, at some point, it would be nice to get a briefing on Kratom in general. What's the landscape, what's happening nationally, just an educational thing. And I don't know if we want to schedule that for a caucus this fall or something in anticipation of something happening, or wait until we see something gets dropped. But at some point, I think it would be a helpful briefing, at least for me as a board member.
And I think for you or for any people watching, we do have a great research brief on that subject. But I think learning about what other states are doing regulation-wise, that would be a great topic for focus. Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you. All right. Well, seeing no other questions or comments, we'll move right along. Thanks very much. All right, so we have Caitlin here who's going to give us our licensing update for the month of October. So again, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I am happy to give an update on behalf of the licensing division.
Yeah, go ahead. So we don't know, but go ahead.
I'm like, do I press the button? So I'll start out with our customer service unit. I'm very happy to report that our customer service unit phone calls have been steadily decreasing to 1,400 calls in September, which is so great for our staff. If you recall, right when we went live with leads the past few months, we've had double the amount of phone calls. And so this is really great for our team. We attribute this to people being able to get more comfortable in the system, as well as some improvements that have been made to our portal. So great news with that. With special occasions, which are our event licenses for nonprofits, remain pretty consistent as we transition into the holiday season now. There's always some type of season where we see these spikes. Currently, we have around 209 special occasion applications pending. And when we remain consistent, we use this opportunity to really work on our procedures and policies and processes to be able to make sure that we're all being consistent with licensing.
Caitlin, can I say a quick question before we go on?
Yes.
Going back to the phone calls, you mentioned that they're reduced. Is it also because people have figured out how to work around the problems, or are things in fact getting better? I just was wondering that piece.
think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
I think customers and authorized representatives and attorneys are getting more comfortable accessing the portal. I think we have better resources, and we also did quite a bit of work in changing up our portal and providing better instruction. And so I think that's really helped. Our staff have reported that since we made that change, there was a
That helped.
significant notice in that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry I didn't ask at the time, but anyway.
No, I appreciate the question. So moving over to education and outreach, with the 1515 expanded services bill this month, project lead Kaylin Gooby partnered with our customer service manager Beth Lehman to provide information to the Washington Festival and Events Association for 3 virtual presentations. Later this month, they'll be heading into a large presentation in Bellevue on the expanded alcohol services on October 30th. The team also provided outreach and resources for the Seattle Special Events Committee at the September Peer Network event. I'd like to say that staff have been doing a great job presenting at these speaking events and providing resources to potential licensees and local municipalities, really focusing on the application process, what folks can expect and how to apply. We have more speaking requests for special occasions. We're preparing for events on November 5th and the 19th for the Washington Society of Certified Public Accountants. This is a pretty standard presentations that we do each year, sharing information about what is or isn't allowed at a special occasion license, as well as how to sell alcohol responsibly. For these type of events, we partner really closely with enforcement and education, and use this opportunity also to provide information about how to get into the portal. We're always talking about our system when we're having these speaking requests. Now, moving into our cannabis licensing unit. I know most of you are aware the city of Linwood officially voted to lift their decade-long ban on cannabis sales within the city of Linwood. I do want to commend our hard work by our cannabis licensing manager, Linda Thompson, and social equity program manager, Erin Washington, for attending numerous evening council meetings throughout the past year, providing information about our liquor license or cannabis licensing regulations. We have 4 retail title certificate holders located in Linwood, and which they'll have 6 months to reinstate their license once the ordinance is signed. So we'll be providing notification for that. This also opens up opportunity for prospective social equity applicants to obtain licenses in the city of Linwood. Moving over to liquor now. So issuing liquor licenses continues to be slower than typical as we work through our system defects and workarounds. You know, we continue to work through these challenges. We are working closely with our IT and department and vendor to make some much needed changes to hopefully improve our processes. Our staff have been super helpful in participating in these meetings as they are the subject matter experts, but it certainly takes up a lot of their time in providing that insight in those changes. We have about 70 files waiting for assignment right now, which is better than where it has been before. And so we're excited about that. That number is fluid though, as we receive more and assign files, but it typically stays around that 60 to 70 number. So again, I'd like to point out how wonderful our staff are. I continue to hear from customers and different associations of how helpful our staff are, that they go above and beyond to work with applicants through the portal and provide information. So really appreciative of that. Mm-hmm. We also had a pretty big transfer of licenses. So CVS Pharmacy was recently brought out by Rite Aid, which instituted a staggered takeover over a 4-month period and requiring each store to get a license at a different time. So our staff worked really closely in processing these 50 applications and was able to issue the applications within the required timelines. I think that was a big win for us, especially with our new system, to be able to meet those expectations. And lastly, I just want to give another kudos to our training team. It's been a busy quarter for us as far as onboarding. We've hired 6 new people and had 11 internal transfers. And so we all know there's lots of coordination and planning going on for new hires. So that also speaks to lots of change going on in our division as well. So that's what I have. If there's any questions.
Great. Thank you very much. Great. Thank you very much. Any questions for Caitlin from board members today? All right, none. So thank you very much. I also want to extend, I met with Director Becky Smith before she left, and she was filling me in on the decision with Linwood. And just want to call out Lisa and Aaron as well for their work. I know that they spent a lot of time working with with that community to make sure that took place. So thank you very much. All right, thanks. All right, moving right along, we've got our Director of Enforcement and Education, Larry Grant. Larry, turned over to you.
Good afternoon, Chair Volendroff. Good afternoon, board members, Holmes and Garrett. I think first I'll open with in-service is complete those 5 days. We did 2 on the west side. Thank you for being there. We did 2 on the east side. We had about 95% of the staff of the 175 we have on hand attend, and 100% attended on the third hybrid day in person. So I think a lot of appreciation for us being able to continue to fund that in-service and that professional development training. Out of the 30 hours, 22 of those were CJTC, so state mandated training for our staff, and then the additional were on resilience and some management. Pilots, we've worked with licensing on a couple of meetings to address some of the concerns about pilots and continuing to have the correct enforcement posture. We had a great meeting on Friday to discuss what we've seen at a couple of the locations. And the enforcement staff actually went out and started doing some outreach based on that meeting. And we'll be doing some follow-ups after a meeting this week, I think tomorrow afternoon. There's been a lot of questions about the FDA contract. We luckily got that contract in and closed before the government shut down. I think we were signing it at the end of the day on the last day. There's been some questions about whether or not the shutdown actually impacts those employees in salary. We found out last week and then verified again today. It is a fee-based contract, and it comes from user fees from the Family Prevention and Smoking Act, Tobacco Control Act of 2019. So right now, what we're hearing from FDA is that it is not impacted, that those staff can continue to work. There's no stoppage there. So we're continuing to do compliance checks. And we have 3 vacancies on that team that we're going to go ahead and recruit for and try to get those filled now. Continuing to focus on unlicensed establishments, and mostly right now it's advising local jurisdictions. So I know there's been some updates to the leadership team on what we're doing there. It's not just one industry, it's across 4 industries right now where we're seeing that. And it could be anything from as small as Arby's maybe selling something that they just weren't necessarily licensed for. So it's not the big picture that you've seen in some of the others. These are just small things that we need to clear up, or clerical things where a business either didn't know or just didn't follow up on the license. So we're doing a lot of outreach there. We're assisting research with last place of service. I know y'all have had a couple of briefings on that. Most of it is moving forward, but we're trying to find a point of contact in Department of Licensing who can get the final step of getting the blood draw added to the Drager or the DUI forms that's processed. I think that was the last piece that Sarah was hoping to get, and it's still taking a little bit of time. So I reached out to a contact at Department of Licensing to see if we can help move that forward. As far as public speaking, I met with Will, Becky, and Spencer late last week with the Wine and Distributors Licensed Association. Good meeting. It was the first meeting for me, so an opportunity to discuss some trends and update them on the things that are going on. And next week, I'll be meeting with the Institute of Internal Auditors in Olympia. Sounds like a fun group. But I'll be doing a day-long conference with them, and a portion of that, at least an hour, is going to be a brief on Liquor and Cannabis Board and some of the investigations that we do. But primarily a focus on how that group and how those groups work with state agencies and help as far as internal controls and things like that. Hiring update, last thing to close with. So we have about 16 officer vacancies and 5 other vacancies. 3 of those are compliance consultants and 2 of those are PS3s. Of those vacancies, we have about 7 that are in the process. Either a conditional offer has been made on the liquor or cannabis side, or they're going through the final backgrounds to be able to be made an officer after an interview with me.
Great.
1 new hire started in Spokane on the 16th. And then we'll have 2 other new hires starting at the end of the month. So hopefully we'll continue to get that number down.
Great.
Those are all the updates I have, unless there's some questions.
Any questions? We're seeing, and I just have one, well, 2 follow-up. One, regarding the federal contract, how are we reimbursed again? You said, I think, how we were reimbursed. Is it Yeah, so just curious about the reimbursement for that.
So we're reimbursed monthly for salary. That's on a set rate, and then also for the number of compliance checks that we do. So we have a set number every month that we're required to do. That'll fluctuate based on personnel availability or our investigative aid availability. Once we report that, the following month, we get that reimbursement.
Okay.
So
So we were able to track fairly quickly in not real time, but fairly accurate if money stops coming
Right.
in. Okay.
yeah, and that was a conversation actually with Don and Spencer today is, okay, we've got this note, we've got the email. When is the first point that we expect to see funding so that we can verify that that's coming in? And we're also still reaching out to points of contact at FDA. They notified us it would be a little lag in communication. We may be working with a different COR or contracting representative because of the shutdown. So I would like to talk to a person and get a name. Right now I have an email, but
Okay.
I'd love a name or a point of contact.
And our plan originally was to fund those for 30 days, right? And then, so is that still the plan to just keep about a 30-day and then after that, if funding were to stop? Okay.
Yeah, that's my initial plan. It was briefed and approved that we could fence about 30 days of funding for the personnel we have on hand.
Right.
So the 4 staff and the supervisor that we have on hand. That money is still there, and barring there being something that happens differently with the state, that's still in place in the event we do have an issue with funding.
Great, thank you. Then lastly, I'll just say, so thank you for inviting me to participate in your in-services. And I want to just acknowledge to you, I've said it to you, I've said it to the director, but I want everybody else to hear this. I don't get to see you in action. I mean, your job is out there in the field and I'm not here in Olympia. And it was great to see you in action in front of your team, just the way in which you operate, the energy that you brought to the training itself, the quality of the agenda overall. I just thought it was really good and just wanted to publicly thank you and acknowledge that.
Thank you.
All right. All right, thanks very much. We will move right along. We've got Justin Nordhorn, who's going to provide us a policy update. And so Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
Great, thanks. Good afternoon, Chair Wallendroff, members Garrett and Holmes. You've heard a lot of the updates from rules and stuff, so I won't rehash a lot of those issues. I thought I'd bring up a couple topics that kind of relate to one another in alcohol and cannabis. And as we've heard from a number of stakeholders, in particular those who've filed for rule petitions that we have recommended denial on. Just kind of wanted to give a landscape of what does this look like as we're progressing through the rule process, so people can have an understanding and be thinking about this. So when the documents come out, they can engage with the rule process, even though that we didn't accept the rule petition. That doesn't mean that we're not thinking about it, and we've committed to be looking at these things. So I'm going to start with liquor and then move into cannabis, and that's the cannabis areas where we've had the rule petitions. But there's also been similar questions coming up in liquor. So the framework here is around prohibited practices, and basically the concepts of providing product at the same price for all retailers, because a lot of the small business owners feel like they're not getting the opportunity to have the competitive pricing on the liquor side as others. And so the dynamics within the trade practice areas for liquor have nuances. I'll put it that way. So basically, you're going to see that beer is probably the most strict in the pricing area, and then wine and spirits. And so when we're looking at some of the concepts around the pricing scheme, we've got blanket statements that are basically there can't be any discrimination in pricing to sell to any purchaser for resale in the state of Washington. So that's a real broad blanket that says, no, you can't sell your product to multiple retailers at different prices. However, there are price differentials for sales of spirits or wine. So again, beer wasn't included in this, where those deviations or differentials can occur based on competitive conditions, cost of servicing a purchaser's account, efficiencies in their handling of goods or bona fide business factors, so long as they're not unlawful practices in other areas. And so that really gives kind of an open-ended opportunity for some changes. But when we're looking at like beer, for example, they're required to have price posts. And so if they change their pricing, they need to be able to notify licensees that these prices have changed. And so beer distributors cannot sell or offer for sale any package to any retailer, basically, at a price differing from the price of such packages shown on their price list. And so essentially, they're presenting a list of their prices and everybody has to adhere to that. So it's slightly different than what we're seeing with the spirits and wine area. But when we're looking at like the 3-tier system type of dynamics, we talked a little bit about discriminatory pricing in there where it calls it out as a prohibited practice by law. So that the discriminatory in that the product is not offered to retailers in the local market on the same terms. And so I think that the critical piece here is the same terms. And that's one of the things that we're looking at for the rule development on the cannabis side for 5403 as well. And so when we're talking about the pricing of products being sold to retail, we've heard complaints about the variety of pricing. And so there are some allowances within the statutory framework of alcohol, but it does, have some pretty strong statements that there should not be any discriminatory pricing. And so when the questions come in, we're going to have these little nuances, and so they are situational in nature, and so we do need to, kind of pick apart some of those details. When we're looking at how we've constructed our rules, though, around alcohol, we have stuff like for the discounts on any type of combined order that's delivered to multiple licensees is not allowed. And so when we're talking about making their purchase, if let's say you're a major grocery store, they're selling to each individual license of that grocery store. Even if they have 150 stores across the state, they're not negotiating on that level. It's the purchases are directly for each license. And so that's what we have in alcohol, and that might be something we want to consider in the cannabis space, especially when people are looking at this 5-store limitation and wanting to kind of place the restrictions on there to create a better and more equitable playing field. So, when we're looking at these types of issues, I think that we can look at applying some of the alcohol regulations towards the cannabis area, even though that they're slightly different. So, kind of moving into the 5403 rules that we're talking about, so the 5403 came out with the predominance of the management agreements. However, when we're talking about owning more than 5 stores, controlling more than 5 stores, we need to be able to address that control piece in a number of different manner. I will pause so I don't ramble too long. Go ahead, Member Garrett. I see your hand up.
Yeah, before you get on the cannabis, going back, because you were rambling a lot. So let me get to something specific. So in the situation like what I've been talking about with you and with Kevin and others, because I'm not getting a clear visual or answer, and depending on who I talk to. So in the situation that I brought up, where the smaller restaurant type environment are complaining that they're having to pay more for alcohol than someone with volume like a Daniel's or Joey's, and on and on and on. That's the issue that people keep bringing to me. So are you saying, do we or do we not have flexibility to do something there?
So we would have some flexibility to address that, but the statutes do create some of the carve-outs on particularly spirits and wine for that price differential on the bona fide business factors. And so we may have to define what that is, and that would be something that we could do within in regulation. So if we were to say, okay, this isn't quite clear enough, the rulemaking process is about providing clarity to statutory provisions. So we could have some latitude in that particular area to kind of call out what that looks like. Those small businesses should have the same opportunity to buy that product at the same price as the other businesses. And so long as they're on the same terms and conditions. And so if somebody's saying that I'm only going to buy 5 bottles of, pick your favorite brand, right? So that price would be the same for anybody buying 5 bottles. But if somebody's buying 50 bottles versus 5 bottles, there may be a different type of price for that. So long as that term is offered to all retailers at the same price and having the same opportunity. So, we see that in a lot of the standard, retail marketplace that, you can buy a 24 pack and it's, per can, it's less.
So that leads to the next statement is a smaller location if they wanted to buy at bulk. So instead of getting 5 cases of Patron and if they bought 20 cases, they could get it at a discount, a different price. The concern there was storage, that they have to store it at the location. And that was the issue I think I was hearing when I was talking to the one person, is having to store it on site and not having the space right there at that small facility to store that volume.
That's correct. And we've actually had conversations in the last several months with the senator on the same thing. And they're talking about, where do people store it if they want to, if they're going to buy in that type of volume. And that's a real challenge. And that same situation comes up even in the product placement, where we were talking about those freestanding displays. Those are actually used for storage of sorts, because the back end of the stores don't have enough storage. And so there's, I think, a number of issues around storage that are across the board for a lot of these retailers, whether they're big grocer or even a small restaurant. Where am I going to put the product if I'm going to have this much? And obviously, grocers are different with high volume turnovers or their model. But yeah, I think it becomes challenging. So if we wanted to do something, I think we could probably offer some clarification in rules if we did a rule project around the pricing issues. We did have back in the early 2010s era, the price post and hold. There was a challenge by Costco. The state won on that particular provision, but then we discontinued that out of the rules. Now we still have price postings, but we don't have them held for a certain period of time. And so we actually had something on the books that we went away from, and we could certainly revisit something like that concept again, because we did see that the court supported it.
Does that get to the issue?
I think I don't know if price post and hold will get to the issue. I think that we would have. I think the smaller businesses right now, unless we were to say that every sale to a retailer has to be at the same price for any volume, that would get at the issue. But taking away the quantity discounts, I'm sure is going to have some concerns, from a number of different stakeholders. But I think if we're trying to say all the small businesses need to be able to buy it at the same price as other businesses, regardless of the quantity, then we would have to make some changes. So right now, I think that would be the challenge and the barrier for those small businesses getting the same price when a bigger business can buy more in bulk.
Right.
I just have a quick question. Ollie, before we move on, can I ask a quick question? So it's related to the storage, and it's just me educating myself. So the issue around storage, is it because of a rule or regulation that if they purchase, they have to store it on site, or is it just the cost of storage that becomes associated with buying in bulk?
Yeah, it's around the cost. We don't have something that says everything is mandated to be stored on site. We don't really have offsite storage.
so
though.
it's just the cost
We do
of-
have like bonded wine warehouses and stuff that are in that nature. You could potentially on your property, theoretically have like an outbuilding or something that's part of your store and licensed, but any place that you would store liquor has to be licensed. And so you'd have to, if you're going to have something offsite, you're going to have a whole nother license to be able to have it there, and that sort of thing. So there are some limitations under regulations for that. So, really licensed businesses have to store everything on site is kind of how the full structure is designed.
Okay. Okay, Board Member Garrett, go ahead.
Well, what you asked was what I was getting ready to get into, the storage piece, because I can see it being a challenge on the quantity. I mean, Costco's, they're able to reduce their prices because they buy in quantity and get it at a lesser price, da da da. That's just the way it is on the quantity. The issue was if a smaller business wanted to buy in quantity to get the discount price, it was the storage issue that they didn't. And I think, and now what I'm hearing, if they were to store off site, they would have to get a license for that location of where it's stored.
Yeah, they would have to have storage. So it's either, and maybe Caitlin can correct me if I'm wrong here because it's been a while since I dealt with that. But there are like duplicate licenses that are available for some of those types of things. I don't think they're utilized that much anymore. But we've seen that more, not for storage, but more in lines with like you have a resort. And so you'd have multiple outbuildings that have different types of functions. And so you would have a duplicate license. So you'd only have one license, but not everything, the entire grounds wouldn't be licensed. So you'd have your different outbuildings that would have, a cafe or a ballroom or whatever the case may be. And you could have a duplicate license there. So theoretically, that duplicate license could be potentially utilized for a storage capacity issue, but you're going to have, there's going to be limitations on the finances there too, because you'd need to have pay for that storage area as well, instead of just whatever's on property. So there'd be an added expense to store offsite, I would imagine.
Well, you're right, it would be an added expense to store off site, but basically that's what they're saying. They need to be able to store off site. But the issue is they would need and I'm not saying this would be the case. So if somebody say, hey, I'm just gonna rent, I can rent a storage unit, a storage whatever, and buy up in bulk and put it into this storage unit. That storage unit would need to be licensed, or is that just something what I just said that wouldn't make sense at all?
We since we license by location, we would have to take a look at a storage unit type of thing. I'm not sure that would really qualify, but let's say, you can identify each locker as a particular, address for the license, then you would have to have a license for that. Now, again, under the duplicate license, you'd be utilizing your own license. I believe there's a fee for that duplicate license that you would have there, and those two would be connected at that point. So there may be some options to look at, as we look into the future, but that's not usually something that's done at this point. Caitlin, did you want to chime in? I see you're reaching for that.
No, I think you're pretty much right, Justin, for the most part. Those duplicates are really used for other service areas in like the resort situation that you're talking about. Typically, when it comes to storage for like manufacturers, we have storage authorizations, specific authorizations for those manufacturers to store offsite. And so I think that would probably be the way to look into if that was even an option for retailers, is to have some type of storage authorization for offsite.
And when we're saying retailers, I think the ones that I'm hearing from, just for clarity, are these small restaurants.
Yeah.
So these small restaurants that what you see is it, the kitchen, this, da, 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 that they are having challenges competing and keeping customers when the customer can leave out of their small restaurant and go next door to Daniel's and get the margarita $3 cheaper. Why buy my liquor here instead of just eating here and going somewhere else buying the drink type things? That's what they're running into. Where in those environments, their revenue pretty much comes from the alcohol. Well, they're not selling alcohol and drinks because the people are leaving their location going to where they can buy that same drink cheaper. So
Yeah,
that's the
And I would say an associated challenge there is if you are not able to purchase the beverages from the distributor at that lower cost, you have to sell that to the consumer above cost of acquisition. So you're
Right.
already, forced to sell that at a higher price than potentially
Right.
others. So that would definitely come into play.
well, that's the issue. Their drinks are higher than the competitor because of that. So there's nothing that we can do there right now, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I don't think right away, but we could, look at that in the future as a potential rule to clarify some of that. And I think that if we were going to utilize, like Caitlin was talking about, a duplicate type of thing, then we probably want regulations to come before we open that to operation.
Great. All right.
So just to quickly touch base then on 5403, when we're talking about those prohibited practices around the 5 businesses. So uniform pricing is one of the concepts that we're folding into that. Trying to make sure that all retailers have access to the products at a uniform price. So if you're a processor, you're not selling to one retailer at one price and another retailer to another price, trying to eliminate sales and those types of things. The other so the other concept that we're also trying to introduce is around practices that are like the antitrust practices. So basically, if you've got a processor who's saying, if you have a retailer that's saying, if you sell to my competitor, I'm not going to buy from you, and it forces that undue influence where they're freezing out some of the new licensees or those types of things. We want to make sure that that's very clear in the regulations that that's a prohibited practice. There are some similarities in the antitrust laws, but we don't control those. And so unless the AG's office comes out with an independent action, there wouldn't be that. But we're in a position that we could actually ensure that that doesn't happen within the state. So that's going to be part of that particular draft rule as it comes out. So I wanted folks to recognize that. And I also think that we need to be looking at the penalties for that, because that's an intentional act when you're trying to freeze somebody else out. And so, we're not suggesting to cancel a license on a first offense, but, possibly even on a second offense, because it's an intentional act. So those will be some things that we'll need feedback from stakeholders on. And so right now, what we're looking at is making sure, there's no discounts for purchases over time, making sure that that's very clear. Potentially something around that uniform pricing. Unrelated to the pricing issues, the other thing that we're trying to do on the management control components of this and the ownership is to make sure that we don't, tie up services like if somebody's hiring the same security company, unrelated, but they just contract with the same company for a service to wash their store at night, or that part-time employee who might work 2 jobs. And so they work in 2 different businesses that are owned by completely independent people, that there's no tie-in there, right? Because they're not controlling that business and those types of things. And so as we're working through the language, we want to make sure that we're not creating a barrier for those types of things where we create that problem for employees. So that'll be something to be looking at. So what we're planning on doing, the schedule at this point, of course, depending on some of the issues that come up, it could get delayed a little bit, but we have a discussion draft that we're formatting. We're going to have another internal meeting, and then we're planning on releasing that discussion draft for stakeholder comments on the 20th of this month, and possibly having some stakeholder engagements shortly thereafter. So that's coming up, and I know that we've had a lot of presentations to the board during board meetings around petitions on this. So I just wanted to kind of expand on that a little bit more on some of the concepts that we're looking at. And I got to say, licensing and enforcement has been, great partners in all of the dialogue, because this is a really complicated issue. And so we need to make sure that, it makes sense and everybody can understand it on the back end too, so we have consistent application as well. So really want to compliment the other divisions for their help and support in this.
And one of the things I said to Justin earlier today, this morning, is once that's released on the 20th, I'm going to call, I would say, an ad hoc cannabis advisory meeting and have that as the topic of that meeting.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you for that update.
Yeah, and other than that, I'll one other update, and then I'll close. Just for folks' knowledge, Skokomish has reached out to us as a tribe that hasn't compacted with us before, and they're interested in engaging in compact negotiations. So that would be another tribe for those services. And then the last thing I'll share is mid next week, I'll be stepping out for vacation for several weeks. And covering. So if somebody needs to reach out to somebody in the policy area, Sarah will be covering for me the first 2 weeks, and Kristen will be covering the second 2 weeks. And so just they're up to speed on a number of these issues. I've been doing a lot of crossover with them, so they'll be able to help anybody out that has those questions. So I'll stop there.
Will,
Perfect.
you haven't sent out the email yet to staff that they are not allowed to take more than a week at a time vacation?
Ollie, you just ruined my thunder. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Justin. Any other comments or questions from board? All right, appreciate it. And just to also appreciate the work cross-divisionally around these complicated issues like that. So appreciate it. All right, Brian, you're up next with our communication update.
Thank you, Chair Vollendorf, members Garrett and Holmes. Media has been generally localized kind of stories on alcohol and cannabis. There is one that I'm expecting a pretty good or big story coming out of Yakima. Yakima County is taking an advisory vote on whether to end their ban, which they've had in place, I think, since the beginning. So it's just an advisory vote, but talked to a reporter who kind of needed the full shebang on cannabis and the history and what everything means.
Brian, just to be clear, that advisory vote, is that an advisory vote of the citizens or advisory vote of the council, or who's?
I think voting? The citizens are voting on
okay.
I think they're voting on that. And so, so I'm looking for a story to be coming out probably any day on that. This was late last week. And then the stuff that I'm really kind of working on right now is you heard me talk last month about the executive order stuff. Jessica is the main point person on that, but I'm a member of a small team that is helping to support and working with the divisions. With Tony and Will and the leadership team, we identified some key services that we're going to be using to track. Jessica's working with the divisions now with their identified reps to figure out how we're going to map that and how we're going to start collecting the data, et cetera. It had to be stuff that we were able to track, that's readily, and everyone got to have their input on that. And my team, one of the executive order 2506 is sort of sweeping on the customer experience. It covers a lot of different buckets. One of the areas that we know that we're going to need to be up to speed on by next April is new guidelines from the federal government on ADA compliance. So it's namely our publications, our website, all that stuff. I think we're lucky that we got some boxes checked off because we just did the new website and it was sort of built with some of those things in mind. But there may be some additional things we're going to have to identify and go there. We just sent out the annual report, noticed divisions. And so this is always a months-long kind of process to pull that together. And I'll always do a work with the board on some of the content that you'll have there. And then, Julie is wears multiple hats, but she's primarily been on the LEADS project as the lead communicator. She still continues to do whatever is required there, but she's going to also be now, as the tax and fee project gets underway, she will be the communications rep. She likes that kind of work. I'm glad she does it. And I will, I'm on the steering committee of that one too, as I was on the last one. So those are the major buckets. You know, not terribly newsy or exciting today, but that's going to be ongoing work for a while.
Great. Any questions for Brian? All right. Thank you very much, Brian.
And Pete has one.
Oh, Pete, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, just quickly, Brian, is there any opportunity for the agency to weigh in on that advisory vote, you know, for the, if there's a voter pamphlet or something like that?
I wasn't asked that. Has licensing been asked to go do like you guys did in Linwood? I can look into that, Pete. No one has reached out to me. It sounds like they haven't either with the licensing folks, but she'll look into it.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. All right, Tony, you are up next with the general agency update.
Good afternoon, Chair Dollendroff and members Holm and Garrett. I will just start off by touching on leads. Caitlin already spoke about leads, but I will say that the number of bugs that are coming in are decreasing. And so we're able to tackle more bugs as the number of bugs that come in are decreasing, which is good news. There's still work to be done, but I'm happy to see the decrease. We are currently looking at mapping out what work we can get done in the next 5 months while our integrator is still on board and under contract with us. And so we're working hard at prioritizing what needs to be done. We work with business, IT works with business and with the integrator on a regular basis. We are looking at sizing the work that needs to be done, figuring out what will make us more efficient and what can help the business line staff do their job better and with a little bit less frustration. I know they have some frustration right now, but Kristen is the project manager who works with hand in hand with the Accenture project manager. I am working with Accenture on a weekly basis as well to monitor resources that are being applied to this and making sure we get as much done in the next 5 months as we can. This is a tricky process because we have Accenture doing some of the development work, and then we have our staff doing refinement work and doing testing work, and then we have to be ready for the deployment. So we have to make sure all the pieces are in balance. If one of those steps is off, then it doesn't work. And so I will say Caitlin has done an excellent job working directly with the vendor. She basically does that every day as part of her, I was going to say not in addition to her day job. It's like her second day job working with the vendor every day. But it's what we have to do now. It's what we have to do for the next time period to get the most out of this time period and to make the system better. So that's all I have about leads, unless there's any questions on that. I was going to talk about the executive orders, but Brian already touched on that. I'll just say that we have to gather a lot of information to comply with Executive Order 03 and 06. And Jessica Dang is doing a great job working with Brian and other people in licensing and enforcement and other places to gather that information. It's not only data, but sometimes it's mapping out our processes and explaining to the governor's office what we do and how we do it. And then, of course, focusing on the customer experience. So we're trying to explain all of that in a reasonable time frame to them. We do a lot of things here, so it's hard to explain all of that quickly when you get down to it. It's hard to explain to people who don't know all the things we do, all the things that we do. So I think I know that we're making good progress on that and staying in good communication with the governor's office. Our new HR director, Janita Thompson, starts on October 16th. We are very excited to have her start. She comes from years of experience at other agencies. She's already had some meet and greets with staff, and I know she's going to be a great asset for us. So excited to have her on board. You met Spencer last week or last month, our new CFO. How did I blank on his last name?
Good.
Good. Spencer Good, last month, our new CFO. He is doing a great job. He took over as executive sponsor of the tax and fee project. I was very happy about that because I was temporarily holding that role, but really wanted to pass it off to someone else to be executive sponsor. He dove right in on the contract negotiations. And so I'm just super happy with that. And I will say we set up a small steering committee for that project. And I drug Brian back into it because he just loves being on technology steering committees. But it's a small steering committee, so not everyone gets to have the fun like they did on the Leeds SMP steering committee. But looking forward to kicking that off with our vendor. And we know that that's going to improve finance. And we're going to be able to give great reports once that system's all in place. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? All right, well, speaking of executive management team, I'm sure you're glad that you have a full executive management team.
I'm very glad.
All right.
It's been a long time coming, good afternoon, Chair Vollendroff, members, Garrett and Holmes. I'm just going to touch on a few things. Was able to do a ride along. Liquor, Larry, thanks to your team, was beneficial as always. Had to cut it a little bit short just due to some scheduling conflicts. So we're going to go back and do part 2 in the evening hours. So
What part of the state was that?
It was in Seattle.
Oh,
It
nice.
was in Seattle.
Okay.
So that was good. Thanks for the invitation to attend in service. I mean, I was able to enjoy one day in each location. Enjoyed being able to spend some time with the staff, and it was good. Let's see, Larry and I got to participate in Seattle University's Crime and Justice Advisory Committee, which was good. Be able to spend time with members of the university and boy, it's a lot of law enforcement agencies talking about policy and potential policy as it relates to academics. So, and then let's see, participated in 2 panels, University of Washington on cannabis policy and similarities and differences between Washington and Colorado with regard to cannabis. And so I really enjoyed that. Lots of insightful questions. So probably do another couple in the future. Great as well. And then looking forward, within the next month, we've got a state emergency operations center meeting to talk about the foundations for executive officers. We've got a WATEC briefing, and then Centennial Accord is coming up the 20th of October through the 23rd, and then the Prevention Summit. So I'll be back at the Prevention Summit for that, and then I've got another ride-along scheduled in November. So continuing this too. This one will be same area, different officers, same up. Yep.
Great. Brian?
I just wanted to add that Will did that UW panel with Allison Holcomb, which I thought might be of interest to you and Pete.
Nice.
Yeah, it was fun. It was the second one. I did one last year with Allison Holcomb, and it appears we're going to have our own road show here before this. And Pete, she says hello.
Nice. All right, anything else?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the director? All right, well, that concludes our agenda. And so with that, I will adjourn the executive management team meeting. Thanks, everybody.
I do want to compliment Brian's taste in shirts.
I'm blending